This is Appalachian Television Omni Media, improving America. 3:05, local Wasteland time. If you're listening, it means the night still has a way of finding you. This is Midnight in the Wasteland. I'm Nightwatch. Some stories come in heavy. You can hear the grief in them before the telling's half done. This isn't one of those. This one came to me the way a lot of strange things do out here, casually, over bad coffee, from a man who didn't tell it like it meant anything at all. That's usually how the odd ones arrive. Not with thunder, not with trembling hands. Just somebody passing through the tower, mentioning a thing they saw once, or twice, or enough times that the world started to feel slightly misfiled around it. A scavver told me this one. Said there used to be a man people saw now and then on the roads leading towards Summersville. Not a raider. Not a preacher. Not one of those poor souls who've been out in the weather too long and started negotiating with ghosts. Just a man. Dusty coat, boots worn thin at the toes, rifle on his back, and a Pip-Boy on his arm with a screen that flickered like an old light bulb trying to remember what it was for. He'd stop people and ask the same question. How far to Summersville? Didn't matter if it was 5 miles out or half a county away. How far is Summersville? And when somebody answered, he glanced down at that little screen, frowned a little, and muttered the same sentence like it belonged to somebody else. Need 25 burned books. Not food, not ammo, not medicine. Burned books. 25. Then he'd keep walking. The scavver said that by itself would have been enough to remember him by. The wasteland is full of strange people, but most of them are strange in broad, familiar ways. They're drunk, they're lonely, they're mean, they're looking for God, or revenge, or just batteries. This man wasn't like that. He was specific. That's what made him unsettling. He didn't ramble, didn't explain himself, didn't try to recruit anybody into whatever private weather he was walking through. He just kept to the road, checked his Pip-Boy, and asked how far it was to Summersville, and repeated that number with the kind of concentration people usually say for surgery or demolitions. 25. The scavver said people started talking about him for the same reason people talk about a stain on the wall that looks a little too much like a face. Not because it was important, because it stayed. A trader saw him near Sutton, heading south. A pair of settlers swore they passed him on the cracked road outside Overlook Cabin. Some boy from a farm claimed the man asked him for directions while he was dragging water buckets, then stood there frowning at the Pip-Boy, like the boy had answered wrong, despite giving him the only road there was. No one had much more to add. He never threatened anybody, never begged, never stole. If somebody offered him supplies, he'd ignore them. If somebody said, "I've got books in my house," he'd ask only one thing: burned? And if the answer was no, he'd move on as if the whole conversation had been a loose nail he'd stepped over. The scavver told me that after a while, some folks started having fun with it. That's human nature. They'd answer him wrong on purpose, send him east instead of west, tell him Summerville's had sunk, tell him raiders burned the whole place down twice more, tell him there wasn't any books left anywhere, unless he wanted to read recipes or cemetery signs. It didn't matter. He'd look at the Pip-Boy, wait, and then start walking again, with the same steady irritation, as if something unseen had corrected the route for him. That was the part the scavver didn't like. Not the books, not the town, the correction. He said it wasn't the man that got under his skin. It was the sense that the man was taking instructions from somewhere no one else could hear. Now, If you know Summersville, you know it has the look of a place that was damaged first and remembered second. Water was where it ought not be. Roads soft at the edges, houses leaning into their own reflections. A town with too much ruin for one small map. And books. Old books everywhere. In the school, in the houses, in the wrecked little rooms where children probably once learned that the world could be neatly sorted into capitals and rivers and polite lies. Some of them stayed dry. A lot of them didn't. And plenty of them, from cooking fires, shelling, storms, or the simple long insult of time, ended up black at the edges, charred through the spine, or scorched halfway into nonsense. The scavver said that's why the story stuck, because if a man were going to go mad over one little particular thing, Summersville was exactly the sort of place madness would send him. He said he saw the man himself one gray morning, just outside of town. The man was standing still in the middle of the road, looking down at the Pip-Boy. Not reading it exactly, waiting on it. The screen flickered green, then pale, then green again. The man tapped it once with 2 fingers, like he's done it 1,000 times. The scavver called out and asked him what was so important about burned books. The man answered without raising his head. I need 25. Well, why? Then there was a pause. Then he said, because that's the task. Task. That was the word. Not need, not plan, not hope, but task. Like he was filling a sack with gravel for somebody else's wall. The scavver asked, what happened after 25? The man blinked once, like nobody had ever thought to ask him that. Then he said, very quietly, then it's done, and walked into town. The scavver followed him for a while. Not close. Close turns curiosity into labor. From half a street back, he watched the man move house to house with the same stripped-down seriousness. He didn't search like a scavver. He didn't look for caps, didn't pry up floorboards, didn't open refrigerators or strip wiring from walls. He was blind to value in every other ordinary wasteland sense. A box of shotgun shells sat untouched on a kitchen counter. A battered medical kit stayed right where it was. A silver locket on an upstairs dresser never even caught his eye. He was after only one thing: burned books. He'd step through a doorway, pick through whatever had collapsed there, find one blackened book that still held together enough to be lifted in one hand, look at it for maybe half a second, and put it in his satchel. Then he'd check the Pip-Boy. Sometimes he would mutter, 7, 11, 15. Not pleased, not disappointed, just counting. The scavver told me that after the first few houses, the thing stopped being eerie and started becoming irritating. That's the right word for it. Irritating. The man would have to climb over broken furniture, push past swollen doors, and kneel in old soot and plaster to pull out one more ruined book that nobody in their right mind would have crossed a room for. And he did it with the grim focus of a mechanic under a deadline. No wonder, no sadness, no reverence, no sign that he cared those books had belonged to somebody, no sign he cared what was in them, only whether they were burned and whether the count was rising. The scavver said that by the time the man reached 18, he found himself getting angry at him. Couldn't say quite why. Maybe because there was something insulting about moving through the wreck of a town, as if it purely existed to satisfy a number. Maybe people hate watching someone obey nonsense with discipline. It makes the nonsense feel stronger. He followed them through a yellow house with no front wall, past the schoolroom, where the alphabet still hung to one bulletin board, but 2 rusted tacks. and into a little white place near the waterline that looked one hard rain away from becoming a memory. The man was in there longer. The scavver waited outside under a porch that creaked every time the wind considered it. After a while, the man came out carrying one last book. Thin thing, black around the edges, cover gone. He stood on the porch step with the book in one hand and the Pip-Boy humming faintly on his arm. Then he looked at the screen and said, 25. The Pip-Boy made a small sound. Not loud, just a chirp. A satisfied little note from a machine too small to deserve authority. The man stood there a second, waiting. The scavver said that was the strangest thing of it all. Not the search, not the counting, the waiting. As if the man expected something else to happen now. A light from the sky, a voice in the wires, a door opening in the air. But nothing did. The town stayed wet. The porch stayed rotten. The fog kept lifting off the water in slow gray folds. That was all. The man stared at the screen. Then his face changed. Not much. Just enough. The way a person looks when they finish a job that they never wanted and realize the reward is only permission to start on the next one. He slipped the book into the satchel and turned off the porch. The scavver, finally close enough to ask, said, "Well?" The man looked at him like he'd nearly forgotten other people were included in the world. Then he asked, "Which road gets you to Watoga fastest?" The scavver laughed, because sometimes a laugh is the only protest you've got. But the man didn't. He checked the Pip-Boy again, adjusted the strap on his bag, and started walking. The scavver called after him, "What do you need there?" The man never turned around. He didn't have to. The answer came back flat over his shoulder. Sugar bombs. The scavver said he stood in that street for a long minute after the man was gone, just listening to the town creak. A house settling somewhere, water tapping wood, wind dragging itself through empty places. Then he laughed again, because there was nothing else to do with it. Not every strange thing in the wasteland is deep. Some of it's just exact. That may be worse. A tragedy, at least, lets you put your hand on the outline. Loss, love, hunger, or fear. But this was a man moving through the ruins of the world, according to instructions so petty, they almost became holy. 25 burned books, then sugar bombs. Then what came next? As if somewhere in the bones of that old machine, there was still a list being kept. As if the bombs fell, the cities drowned, the governments died, and one stubborn little piece of the old world kept clearing his throat and saying, "You still have errands." Maybe that's all it was. A broken Pip-Boy, a scrambled memory, some half-dead routine that got its hooks into a lonely man and taught him to mistake repetition for purpose. Wouldn't be the first time. Out here, people cling to all kinds of instructions just to keep from hearing the bigger silence. Sweep the same floor, count the same ammo twice, check the same door 3 times before sleep, walk the same road, ask the same question, keep moving. Sometimes it's madness, sometimes it's structure. Most nights, the difference is just whether it helps. The scavver told me he heard about the man twice after that. Once near Camden Park, asking directions with that same clipped patience. Once from a caravan girl who swore he passed her by the camp at dusk, looking at a stack of old magazines, and asked only whether any of them had been through a fire. Maybe he's dead now. Probably. The Wasteland isn't generous with people who ignore food, weather, and good sense in favor of errands. Or maybe he's still out there somewhere, boots on cracked asphalt, screen flickering green against his arm, walking towards another town with another number in his head. There's something about that I haven't quite shaken. Not because it's sad, because it's familiar in the wrong way. All of us, if we're honest, have taken orders from things that didn't deserve the rank. Habits, old fears, machines, promises we made so long ago, they outlived the reason for making them. We tell ourselves we're choosing. Sometimes we are. Sometimes we're just following a blinking light through a dead town, trying to finish one more task, so the noise in our chest will finally mark it as complete. And sometimes, when it does, all you get for your trouble is the next destination. You've been listening to Midnight in the Wasteland. I'm Nightwatch. I'll be here as long as the tower holds and the signal finds its way back to you. Until then, if somebody stops you on the road and asks how far it is to some place half flooded and falling apart, you can point the way. That's mercy enough. But if they tell you they need 25 of anything, burned books, cracked plates, boxes of sugar bombs, makes no difference. Don't waste too much time trying to understand it. The old world ran on lists. The new one runs on stranger things. And some poor souls are still out there doing their best to satisfy both.